show.
Welcome to episode 126 of the Gluttons For Punishment Podcast, or GFP, a Toronto Maple Leafs and NHL podcast hosted by Michael Lepore and Anthony Bruno. Thank you so much for listening and watching us on YouTube as well. It's been a while since our last show. Since we last recorded an episode of the GFP podcast, the Leafs are 4-0-2, undefeated in regulation. I just want to say that because there's been a lot of chatter this year about how terrible the Leafs are in regulation. They now only have 8 regulation wins in 26 games, but they are 15-6-5 on the season, on pace for 110 points.
Let's go.
Just smashed the New York Rangers 7-3 at MSG. We have so much to get into in this episode. We are going to give you our thoughts and opinions on everything that's going on with the Leafs right now, catching up on all the games that we missed. And we're also going to talk about my second favorite team, the Edmonton Oilers. They're on a heater right now. As of recording, currently on a 7-game winning streak, probably going to beat the Blackhawks to make that 8 in a row. So I promise you want to stay tuned until the very end. But now, before we get into all that, it is time to officially welcome in my partner in crime, Mr. Michael Lepore. I think that was extra. Put some extra juice into that one today. How you doing today, man?
Ready to go, Bruno. You're pumped. Episode 126. Let's go. As always, my friend, happy to be here. I spent 4 days in beautiful Vermont, J-Peak, Vermont, for a hockey tournament. So I had to survive on NHL Network in the US. Different, man. Like, the coverage is just different. The things they talk about, how they approach things, the personalities they have on. But God smiled on me because their game of choice on Saturday night was the Maple Leafs versus the Predators. So I got to sit in my cabin and watch the Buds get the W. It was nice, man. It was nice. And it was nice to get like a just different coverage. Like, here we are in Canada and, you know, we have TSN and Sportsnet, and we just kind of go on those and those personalities, and those are the guys we follow on Twitter. It was kind of cool to see like morning highlights in a different way, like with a different format and different people.
Yeah, it's always refreshing because all we're used to here is Sportsnet and TSN, and it's the same panelists who have been doing this for the last like 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always good to get a fresh perspective on things. But we got to dig right into this, Lepore, because there is a lot going on in Leafland since our last show. Our last show was in November, so It's been a while. We have a lot to catch up on here. As I mentioned off the top, the Leafs coming off a really impressive 7-3 win over the New York Rangers. There was a point during the game where it looked like it was kind of getting away from Toronto. They had a 4-1 lead, then it was 4-3. But all in all, it was honestly one of their best wins of the season, in my opinion, and they've kind of strung together some very impressive games recently. So I just want to get your general thoughts on how you feel about this team right now, because it seems like they haven't been playing well this season. Like, even when, again, I've been harping on this for so long. You look at the underlying numbers, they're not great. But then when you look at the record, 15-6-5, on pace for 110 points. They have a lot of injuries right now. They're battling through adversity. So what are your thoughts right now on how this team is playing?
I think that what is not getting enough attention is sort of, I'd say, what the Leafs are dealing with, because I don't want to go with like the whole boohoo, woe is me thing. But I just don't think what's not getting enough attention is how well they're doing considering what they're dealing with. And it's not a matter of, okay, they have a couple injuries, one being their starting goalie, and they're putting up a pretty good record. But this team has AHLers on the blue line right now. We had our third string goalie in tonight, and we went into MSG and smacked the Rangers around. And I mean, like you said, this was probably one of their better, if not their best games of the season. But if you had listed off to me at the start of the season that Giordano was going to be out, Liljegren was going to be out, Timmins was going to be out for a while, Klingberg was gone, and people are already laughing. But at the end of the day, he's still a defenseman, an NHL defenseman. And when he's not there, the Leafs are worse. It's better to have him than nothing. So debatable. But
I was going to say, people are probably yelling at you.
Yeah, addition by
subtraction. Their screens on YouTube being like,
I'll take that.
Actually, he's terrible, John.
Actually, he's terrible.
But I do agree. Actually, I mean, I think he's a little bit better than people give him credit for, honestly.
Like, is he better than Lagerson, Lajoie?
Yeah, like Billy Lagesson. I mean, Billy Lagesson is just out there kind of doing nothing, which is fine because
he hits people. I like how he hits people.
Yeah, I mean, he's been totally fine. Even Lajoie, he's, when you're not noticing those guys, it means they're doing a pretty good job. Yeah. So you know what? I'm going to say it's pretty on par with what we were getting. Maybe a little bit better than what we were getting from Johnny Klingberg.
Yeah. So it's not, at the end of the day, people can talk about underlying numbers like you mentioned, but having Lagesson, Lajoie, and Benoit on the blue line, it's pretty impressive that they got this record, regardless of how they got there. At the end of the day, the goal is to win, and they are winning games. So props to them, man. Like, as Leafs fans, we don't give them enough credit when they're playing well, and how they're stringing wins together with the blue line they currently have, and now with Joseph Woll out, is awesome, and Leafs fans should be happy about it.
I will say, I'm still not that impressed with this team. Just, again, based on the underlying numbers, their inability to control games, as we've been so accustomed to with this team. Like, we've been so used to them just dominating possession, dominating the shot attempts. That just hasn't been the case this year. And I don't even want to dig into the numbers. Like, you can find this stuff, go to Natural Stat Trick, wherever you get your advanced numbers. This team is not controlling play the way we're used to. And that still has me concerned. Now, I am impressed, as you said, how they've been able to battle through adversity here. When you're missing 3 NHL defensemen, when you're missing your number one goalie in Joseph Woll, it's tough. And again, I even said this really early in the season. People were not saying enough about like the time that the Leafs needed to adjust to this new lineup as well. Like, think about it, right? There was like 3 iterations of this team over the last calendar year. You go back to last year before the trade deadline, right? When Engvall was still on the team and Sandin.
Weird.
And go down the list, right? Then they make all those moves at the deadline. They get Ryan O'Reilly, Luke Schenn, Sam Lafferty, who's having a really good season with the Canucks, by the way. Jake McCabe. So all those new guys come in. Then they reset again this offseason where O'Reilly's gone, Schenn is gone, Achari's gone, Lafferty's gone. In comes Klingberg, Domi, Bertuzzi, Reeves. So we've had like 3 iterations of this team over the past calendar year, all the changes they've been going through. Then you mix in all these injuries on the blue line, these injuries in net, and this team is still 15-6-5 through 26 games, on pace for 110 points. And now, over the past, let's call it the last 3 to 5 games, has looked really good and looks like arguably the best team in the Eastern Conference. Yeah. So, in that case, I'm pretty impressed. Santa baby, the season for a fresh cut is finally here with the sponsors of today's show. My God, that was terrible. But this is all about Manscaped. All right? The leaders in below-the-waist grooming have just launched their 5th-generation lawnmower to help you avoid another silent night in the bedroom this year. Take care of your special snowflake with Manscaped and watch your South Pole shine like never before. Get the best stocking stuffer of all by going to manscaped.com and using our exclusive promo code GFP20 for 20% off and free shipping. 'Tis the season, Lepore. 'Tis the season.
'Tis the season for Manscaped products in your stocking. Gentlemen, it is Christmas time. The snowflakes are falling. Take care of your jingle bells. Make sure they're clean. Head over to manscaped.com, GFP20 for 20% off and free shipping. You will not be disappointed, whether it's for yourself or a stocking stuffer for someone you really and truly love.
Jingle your balls all the way to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping using our exclusive promo code GFP20. So go to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping using GFP20.
You mentioned the underlying numbers. It's weird. Someone posted expected goals for percentages. And I think if you ask most Leafs fans at this point what their take on Bertuzzi was, I think you'd get more negative than positive. Or I'm almost certain you would get more negative than positive. But his underlying numbers are very, very good. Like there was one point where when he was on the ice, the Leafs were outscoring opponents something like 8-2. And the scoring chances when he was on were way up and very low against when he was on the ice. So it's very strange because when it comes to the eye test, it's not there and his numbers haven't been there. It's just there's something brewing there that's working. And on the flip side of it, I feel like Marner has kind of kicked it up a notch in the last couple of weeks, again, with the eye test. But reverse to Bertuzzi, Marner's underlying numbers have not been good. There's been a few games where his expected goals for percentage has been like in the 30s. And like for Mitch Marner, low and like consistently. Like I think it was something that he wasn't higher than a low 50, something like 8 or 10 games in a row.
Marner's still under 47%
shocking.
Lepore for expected goals for percentage. So you're absolutely right. And Bertuzzi still leads the Leafs. His expected goals for percentage at 5-on-5 over 61%.
Crazy.
Pretty wild because
So
Bertuzzi was just getting dragged through the mud the first couple of weeks on the team, but he's actually looked really good the last little bit.
So you'd be on the side, you're happier with that signing at this point, greater than you're disappointed?
Yeah, I've been impressed with Bertuzzi. And what I remember last year for the Bruins in the playoffs, like it wasn't even his goal scoring, it was his playmaking ability. And you're seeing it now. Like he's made some really nice plays. His passing ability, his vision, he seems to be in the right spot almost all the time. Like he's playing well with, you know, whether it's Tavares and Marner, who it happens to be right now, or even when he was playing with, you know, with Matthews and Marner. And obviously the lines have been shuffled all over the place. You know, he's played with everyone in the core four at this point, but I think he's been doing a nice job. And even Domi for that matter. I think he's looked nice since they moved him back to center. I think he's settling in. The goals aren't there, but again, just like Bertuzzi, I think the playmaking's been really good. He just has to shoot more. Max just hates shooting the puck.
Yeah. It's going to be really interesting to see how the Domi situation plays out with regard to the lineup, because I know I don't want to see him as the number 3 center going into the playoffs.
Oh, you're concerned about that, eh?
Oh, yeah. I think that's where they'd have to add. I mean, think of it. They added O'Reilly last year. Domi, like, no, come on. We can't. So, like, I'm sure that's on the radar, how they're going to work that out. And as far as Bertuzzi goes, when it comes to playoff time, he mentioned the series against Florida. He had 5 goals, 5 assists in 7 games, 10 points in 7 games, 5 goals. So a lot of Leafs fans are saying, oh, it's for the playoffs, wait for the playoffs. But as a Leafs fan myself, I'm not too confident in just sitting around and waiting and watching the way he's playing now and expecting him to be some sort of beast in the playoffs, because, you know, that would favor us far too much than reality would allow.
Yeah, people are saying the same thing about Domi. Don't worry about it. Just wait until the playoffs. But no, we want to see these guys playing well right now. We don't want to wait 82 games and expect them to flip a switch. Like, these guys got to be playing well right now, because this team, it's like I said, through the first 20 games, didn't really look that great. That's a quarter of the season, in case you didn't realize that. So it's time to get their asses in gear. Everybody, not just the core 4.
Would you re-sign Domi right now? Like, if you could get in the time machine, would you give him that deal again?
Yeah, I think so. Considering it's only a 1-year, $3 million contract, I would be concerned, if, I would have been really concerned if it was a long-term deal, let's say 4 to 5 years.
Oof.
I would still be scared to do that, honestly. Let's say Domi has a nice season, ends up with, 50 points, something like that, has a good playoff run. I would still be kind of scared, honestly, to give that guy term, because, the Tavares contract is coming off the books in a couple of years. They have to re-sign Nylander still. This is still an ongoing saga with Nylander. You don't just want to be throwing money to mid-tier players who don't really deserve it. So as much as I like Max Domi, I like Ty Domi, I like the whole Domi family for that matter, but you got to be very careful with who you're paying these days.
Yes or no, will Domi be a Leaf in 24-25?
Oh man. I'm gonna say no.
Oh, surprised.
What do you think?
It's tough because you just acknowledge, okay, you'd give him that contract again if we had the time machine, but would you give it to him at the end of this season? Would you give him another year at $3 million? So I'm kind of on the side is I'd give him a little bit of a haircut there, and he's got to be willing to accept that, or he's going to want term if you're gonna give him that haircut. So I think that's where it's gonna go. If I had to guess, I think that's where he's gonna get like a 3-year, $8 million deal or something.
Yeah, that's not bad. I don't think I'd go more than 3 years with that guy. I just think you got to be very careful, especially when you're looking at like the mid-tier guys at your lineup. You know, even like guys like Callie Yarncroke for that matter. Like if you're gonna give them a long-term deal, and Yarncroke, I believe, got 4 years, you can't be throwing around money to anybody. Like it's just not going to work. And again, like the cap's going up, Tavares' contract is coming off the books, but I don't want to see Brad Treliving just, you know, and who knows? Who knows how the Leafs are going to do in the playoffs? Who knows what Max Domi is going to do and Tyler Bertuzzi, you know, when the games really matter and how that's going to affect negotiations and stuff. But you still got to be very careful with those guys. But then you could look at a guy like Hyman, for example. Like, do you think the Leafs, if they could do it again, and I know the cap was an issue at the time, would they just give Hyman 8 years, $5 million a year, and not even think about it? No. The way he's playing now.
I mean, but things everyone knew, like everybody knew with Hyman that in the short term it was going to be a fine contract or a good contract. It was the last few years of it. And I think that's still where I stand. Why you'd give it to him right now, 8 times 5?
Man, the way Hyman's playing, and I'll be the first to admit, I did not like that contract, and I'm not alone there. I know there's a lot of Leaf fans who thought, man, like love Hyman as a player, heart and soul guy, but really an 8-year deal for $5 million per? Or was it a 7-year deal? Was it a 7 or 8 year deal for $5 million per?
Well, he got 7. The Leafs could have given him 8.
There you go. So it was a 7-year deal. That's right, because obviously he changed teams, and the team that retains you can give you that 8th year. But honestly, looking back, I mean, if the Leafs had the cap space, I would have been totally comfortable. Now, hindsight's 2020, but I would absolutely give Hyman that money the way he's playing.
Yeah, now that you mention it too, I mean, worst case scenario is what? He gets blasted away into Matt Murray and John Klingberg Island. And the three of them are sipping on something somewhere. I mean, so yeah, fuck it. Give him the money. Same question, Bertuzzi. Is Bertuzzi a Leaf in 24-25?
I would say it's more likely that, actually, I don't know. I think it's more likely that Bertuzzi is a Leaf, because I think if they're going to prioritize one of those guys, it would probably be Bertuzzi. He's just a better player. But then the whole salary thing is obviously a big factor in this, because Bertuzzi's just going to command more money, and you can't just be throwing, I don't know, 6 or 7 million his way either. Honestly, the right answer, Lepore, is it's probably likely that neither of those guys are back with the Leafs.
Well, with Bertuzzi, with the way his season's going statistically,
yeah, it's not great.
That's hard for him to get in there and be like, I want 7 million. Like, no, are you crazy? I mean, he's got to put up points, and he's not. He's got to score goals, and he's not. So that's an awkward one. And I don't think he's in there saying, oh, look at my expected goals for percentage. I mean, like,
yeah, exactly.
Let's get real. So
no, at the end of the day, those guys, they need their counting stats to get paid. They can't be looking at XGF percentage and trying to get paid because of that.
$8 million. That's going to be something to look at for the Leafs as the season comes to a close. And I think with either of those guys, there's no chance they sign before the summer with the Leafs. I mean, there's no way that extension's done now. I mean, even if you're Bertuzzi, the way things are going, you're going to get hosed if you do it now. You're going to want to try to turn it on a little bit.
The only guy who I think is going to sign is William Nylander before before the summer. I think he's going to pull a Pasternak. I still think it's coming. It's just a matter of when it's coming. And I'm sure Treliving and Nylander's agent have been going back and forth. It's going to happen. I really do believe it will. It's just a matter of when. And I think it's going to play out like Pasternak. We're going to get closer and closer to the playoffs. And out of nowhere, I think he's going to sign like an 8-year deal for, I don't know, man, $10.5 million, whatever the hell it's going to be. But
I'm okay with that.
I don't care at this point because I love Nylander. And if the Leafs lose him, then this entire operation is over.
We're shutting down the podcast because Wee Willie Nylander plays for the Chicago Blackhawks.
Yeah, no, we're shutting down everything. The Leafs are shutting down. GFP is shutting down. You can't lose a player like that. That would just be malpractice at the highest degree. Cannot lose William Nylander.
No way.
All right, let's chat a little bit about John Tavares.
Let's chat about John Tavares.
What a night for him on Long Island, picking up a goal and an assist to reach 1,000 career points. He does it in the barn, in the city of his former team. The team, I shouldn't say the team hates his guts, but the fans certainly hate his guts. They were booing the guy after he recorded his 1,000th point. Absolutely gutless from Islanders fans. Have some class. The guy gave you his blood, sweat, and tears for, 9 years? But anyway, I just want to have a short convo here about John Tavares because, I've been guilty of, even calling him, washed up at times, or at least questioning if he's washed up. And then you look at the stats, point per game every year, basically putting up the same production as he did when he was the captain of the New York Islanders. What are your thoughts on Tavares? Are we not giving this guy enough love? Because, again, you look up at the stats this year, point-a-game player, he's doing what he does. I still think that he hasn't quite reached the heights that, we thought he would with this team, even from, a leadership perspective and guiding this team to the playoffs. I still think it's been a disappointment, honestly. But what are your thoughts on Johnny Toronto?
Well, I think it's kind of the same with all the big Leafs at this point because we haven't seen a real and true run. I mean, it's easy to say, but how much would we look back at the Gilmore-Clark era if the 93 and 94 conference finals didn't exist? And this specifically 93 because they were so close to getting there. So I think at this point, you do look at the body of work of Tavares and the Marner, Matthews, Nylander, Riley, all of them, and it's very good. These guys are some of the best Leafs the organization has ever put out. But until we see a playoff run, sort of the historical relevance is not going to be there, right? And sometimes too, when we're going through something, we don't realize how special it is or how good we have it. And you look at Tavares, he hits 1,000 points, okay? And he's got a ways to go in his career. I mean, I can see him playing for a while, and the way his body is, just the somatotype he is, I kind of expect him to, I don't want to say nosedive, but he'll slow down in his mid-30s. He's a Hall of Famer.
Oh, so you want to have this conversation. Is John Tavares a Hall of Famer?
Bruno, he's got 430 some odd goals in his career. So he should get 500. Okay. He's got the rest of this year and then the next year with the Leafs. And then who knows what he does after that, how many more years he plays. But I'm pretty confident Johnny T is going to hit 500 goals. And then I don't expect him to be putting up, 70, 80 points for the next 5-6 seasons. But like you said, he's been really consistent. So he's hit 1,000. And it's kind of funny when you look at the all-time list of players and the points, because you get 1,000. And what they say Tavares was, he's like the 98th guy or 99th guy to hit 1,000 points. But then you look and there's a big clusterfuck of guys, just over 1,000. But then if you're 1,300, you're top 20 or something. And I'll have to look at that in detail to get the exact number, but who knows where he'll finish. And he's not playing in the 80s. So the guy's a Hall of Famer. Lesser players than John Tavares are in the Hall of Fame.
Now, I do agree that you could say there's lesser players than Tavares who are in the Hall of Fame, but right now I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. I think he needs to do a little bit more. And you could actually look at him in the same lens that you look at Steven Stamkos. The reason I always compare these guys, it's not because they're both from Toronto, but it's because they're the exact same age. They came into the league 1 year apart. They're both centermen. They both have similar counting stats. But you look at Steven Stamkos, the guy has a 60-goal season. He has over 500 goals, over 1,000 points. And he's obviously won 2 Stanley Cups. He's been to what? And I know one of the cups, like he barely played because he was injured, but he's been to like what, 4 cup finals now, Steven Stamkos.
Yeah.
John Tavares has 2 playoff series wins in his career, has never made it past the second round. I just think he has to do a little bit more. He's never going to win a Hart Trophy. He's not going to win a Rocket Richard. Those days are past. He's obviously past his prime at this point. I just think there has to be some better team accolades. He's got to at least get to a cup final or win a cup. I think if he wins a cup, then I think he's a Hall of Famer.
No, yeah, Bruno, yeah. Like
that's a slam dunk.
I think he's in now. The guy brings a Stanley Cup to Toronto. He's a first ballot. And I wasn't giving enough credit to the guys who put up big numbers. So to put in perspective, so let's use our boy Matt's. Sundin is 30th all time in points, and he had 1349. So that number is, and this is how I always put it. So like that number, okay, 350 more points for Tavares. That number is attainable. We all agree that number is attainable. Okay, so can a guy who's in the top 30 of all time in scoring, who didn't play in the 80s, not be in the Hall of Fame? That's how I look at it. And especially 500 goals gets you in, Bruno. You can't be sitting there on 500 plus goals and not be in the Hall of Fame. And I'll say it, like being from Ottawa, Senators fans are always quick to like, oh, like why did Sundin get in so quickly? And it took Alfredsson so long. 500 goals. And I didn't make the rules as far as the Hall of Fame goes, but we all know like there's certain criteria and black and white stuff. If you score 500 fucking goals in the National Hockey League, you're going to the Hall of Fame, man. And I expect him to get it.
That's fair. And I think the NHL is guilty of letting too many guys in. Like when you compare the Hockey Hall of Fame to like the Baseball Hall of Fame, or even like the NFL or the Pro Football Hall of Fame, I should call it. Like it's a lot harder to get into those Hall of Fames than it is the Hockey Hall of Fame. And listen, Tavares right now, he's sitting on 435 goals.
Yeah.
1,001 points. Like the counting stats are going to be there. It's a good comparison comparing him to Matt Sundin, and not just because they're both captains of the Maple Leafs, but they're going to have similar stats when it's all said and done. But right now, Sundin has been more successful in the playoffs. Now, Sundin hasn't won a Stanley Cup, never played in a cup final, but he has a lot more playoff series victories than John Tavares. So, listen, he's going to hit 500. You could say he's a Hall of Famer. Maybe I just have higher standards at this point, and I think he has to lead the Leafs on at least one deep playoff run. And then I think you could say he's a shoo-in. But as of now, I just think he has a little bit of work to do.
Yeah, I'll accept that side of the debate. But yeah, the NHL Hall of Fame. The NHL Hall of Fame, the Hockey Hall of Fame. It is soft. Like some guy, I like when people call it the Hall of Very Good, not the Hall of Fame or elite or whatever terminology you want to use. Because like there are guys, and even guys I love, I'm not going to say names because I don't want to shit on them, where like, yeah, players I loved to watch growing up, but then they get in the Hall of Fame. I'm like, Hall of Fame?
Yeah, you got to be like the elite of the elite.
Yeah.
There's too many guys in there who just don't quite deserve it. Like even like Alfredsson for that matter.
Yeah, throw it in, Bruno,
like
for
really, Daniel.
there.
I mean, Daniel Alfredsson, he was a great player, man. I used to love watching the Alfredsson Spezza Heatley line. Like, but come on, is that dude really a Hall of Famer?
You see, I think, and again, it's all and you saying that before as everyone's going crazy, it's not an insult to him. It's just saying, because I hate when their discussion comes up of who should be in the Hall of Fame. And when people say, well, he's better than so-and-so, and they pick a random player that probably shouldn't be in anyway. It's like, well, you can always do that. And that's arguing against the standard that is the Hockey Hall of Fame. Like, if someone said to me, to show like I'm not biased, if they had it their way and with certain credentials that Sundin wasn't, I'd be like,
it's
okay.
fair.
Like, I mean, again, you look at the all-time scoring numbers and that stuff, like the 500 and whatever, 560 some odd goals he scored, was it? So it's like, yeah, maybe that's got to get him in. But there's a lot of guys, and like I will say it, like when Paul Correa got in, I was like, like Paul Correa was a fantastic player. He was an elite player. But when I think of the Hall of Fame, it's kind of like when I think about a team retiring a jersey number. Like those are supposed to be like generational players, like once in a generation franchise players. Just, I don't know. I find it's too soft. And again, a lot of these guys who are there who maybe I wouldn't give the green light to, I loved as players. I just think the standard for what gets you that plaque on the wall in downtown Toronto should be a little higher.
Yeah, like if you're looking at Tavares' stats compared to Daniel Alfredsson, like he's going to blow him out of water.
Exactly.
Alfredsson has 444 career goals. So Tavares is 9 goals away from Daniel Alfredsson. Alfredsson, 1,157 points. So, I mean, if Alfredsson's in, then you can't leave Tavares out. But then again, you could make the argument that neither player deserves to be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's kind of a weird situation. He's probably going to get in because, as you said, he's going to score, you would think between 5 to 550, 550 to 600 goals potentially, depending on how long he plays. It's like, how do you leave a guy out like that? And he might only win 2 playoff series in his entire career and make the Hall of Fame. Anyway,
we're going to hear though, right? When he does get in. Oh, Leafs bias is because he played for Toronto. And
yeah, exactly.
The media just got him in, and Sportsnet and TSN. Yeah.
Anything else on the Leafs you want to discuss before we move on to my second favorite team?
Really quickly, Bruno. Well, really quickly. Maybe we'll go on a rant and kill more time here just to bore people. So we often talk about how the Leafs are treated differently on the networks, on Twitter, because they're the Leafs. Everyone loves them. Everyone hates them, right? And even as Leafs fans, sometimes we give them too much credit. Sometimes we don't give them enough credit. And so let me tell you something. So I was in Vermont, like I said, and I had NHL Network. And here I am, had it on all day long, okay? And it's the morning, having my breakfast. And they do this thing where they'll just kind of branch off randomly and talk about a certain player. And they'll discuss a certain player. And they started showing highlights of Marner. Okay. And then the panel, the 3 or 4 of them, started a discussion about Mitch Marner. Okay. And let me tell you, Bruno, they were going off about how amazing Mitch Marner is. One of the guys even went as far as to say he thinks he may be the most naturally skilled player in the National Hockey League. Okay. And I'm sitting there, and here I am, the Leaf fan, like smile on my face. Wow, these guys are pumping the tires of a player on my team. But it genuinely felt weird. It felt strange just to be watching a panel talk about Mitch Marner, and it was all positive, all completely positive about how, like, look at the numbers he puts up. He's a fantastic player defensively, this, and they were just going off. And sometimes you need stuff like that to kind of slap you in the face or to kind of look at things a certain way. And it definitely did that to me because I was sitting there thinking, again, we talk about the media and how the Leafs are treated and how the fans treat the Leafs, but that would never happen on TSN.
Oh, no chance.
Full stop.
Actually, it might happen on TSN. It's more likely it would happen on TSN as opposed to Sportsnet, in my opinion.
You think?
If you watch any regional broadcast on Sportsnet, I feel like they don't totally lean into like, this is a Leafs broadcast, let's just pump the tires of the Leafs. Like there's always something negative. And hey, maybe even our podcast is guilty of that sometimes, talking a little bit too negatively about the team. But that is refreshing to hear, honestly, that, a network like the NHL Network is gushing about how good Mitch Marner is, whereas I don't think we've gushed about how good Mitch Marner is probably since his point streak last season. And then prior to the point streak, it was all about he can't score in the playoffs. Remember, it was like that 17 or 18 game goal drought in the playoffs. It's like 90% negativity with Mitch Marner. And there's a little sliver of positivity when he has the point streak, when he's scoring goals with a fishbowl helmet. But they're few and far between, the moments of positivity with Mitch Marner.
It's a Hall of Famer.
I mean, shit. If Tavares is getting in and Alfredson's in, Marner's in, Matthews is in, is Nylander a Hall of Famer?
Yarncroc. Keep going. Where do we draw the line?
Oh, my God. No, I love that, though, man. I think we can take a page out of that book, and maybe we could even be a little bit more positive. Like, how about Austin Matthews on pace for 66 goals?
Yeah.
Let's fucking go.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
I'd love to pull up those lists from the offseason, putting him outside the top 10, or I think he was even 20 players in the league.
Oh, remember those takes that Tage Thompson is better than Austin Matthews?
Yeah.
Tim Stützle is better than Austin Matthews.
Robertson.
Jason Robertson. Get the fuck out of here. Austin Matthews, a big fuck you to the rest of the National Hockey League and the people who thought maybe he lost a step. He's not quite the same guy he used to be. On pace for 66 goals.
And the best part
he's
about
going
it,
after
Bruno,
what McDavid did last year. Because McDavid's like, screw you, Austin Matthews. I'm going to get more than you did. And now Matthews is coming back being like, no, I'm going for 70 this year.
And the reason why I feel so good, Bruno, is because he's signed. So we don't have that nervousness like we have with Nylander right now, where there's that part of us is like, whoa, cool it a bit. Whereas Matthews signed his deal. It doesn't kick in until next year. Score 100 goals, Austin. We don't care. You're locked in. Make us feel like we underpaid you. Just go off, my friend. Go off.
Exactly. We can finally breathe. Although I'm still a little bit pissed off that it was only a 4-year extension.
Yeah,
and it wasn't more than that. But
he doesn't get the vote on your Hall of Fame ballot because of it. You'll hold it against him.
Yeah, that's the one thing I'm holding against Austin Matthews. I love everything about that guy except him not signing longer than a 4-year extension.
The host of the GFP podcast will get a Hall of Fame ballot soon, I think.
Yeah, I think so. At least one of us will probably get credentials to vote on the Hall of Fame.
I would think so.
Yeah, why the hell not?
Sure.
All right, man. We have to talk about the Edmonton Oilers. It did not look pretty about 3 to 4 weeks ago when they were 2-9-1. They lost to the San Jose Sharks, who at the time were looking like arguably the worst team in NHL history. I know they've turned it around since then, but the Oilers have turned it around big time. As of recording this podcast, riding a 7-game winning streak, they're now currently tied 1-1 with the Blackhawks in the first period.
Connor Bedard opened the scoring. Apparently, he sniped one.
Oh, okay.
Connor versus Connor. I like it.
We'll see. I mean, maybe the Blackhawks end the winning streak here. The Oilers closed as minus 490 favorites.
Ouch.
Like, just outrageous. Like, that is just like an insane. That has to be like one of the biggest favorites of the year in the NHL.
Yeah.
Closing as a 490 favorite. But anyway, we'll see if they can make it 8 in a row. But during this 7-game winning streak, they're first in the NHL in goals per game, first in goals against per game. Their power play operating at 43.5%. They have the second-ranked penalty kill at over 95%. They're only 3 points out of the final wildcard spot with 2 games in hand. Are they back, Lepore? Because I officially wrote them off and said that their season was over. But as we also talked about, the Western Conference is pretty terrible outside of the top teams. And at this point, it looks like the Oilers are probably going to sneak in. They're not going to finish top 3 in the division. Like, I don't think they're going to catch the Kings, Canucks, or Golden Knights. But based on who they're trying to chase in the wild card race, I think Edmonton's going to get in at this point, even though I wrote them off a month ago.
What's the points total right now that gets you in the West? So right now, the Coyotes, oh my God, the Coyotes have the second wild card and they're 500.
Yeah, it's a complete joke.
Wow. Because I always look at it, like I'll look at the Oilers and say, okay, they have, what do they have? They have 67 games left and they have 25 points. So I'd say, well, they need the 70 more points, right? Because then, okay, they need the 95 points, but it's not going to be that high. So
Maybe they only need like 90, 91 to get in.
Yeah. Well, what was it last year? Wasn't it like 88 last year or something? It was low.
Here,
Or
I'll
was that
check
two
right
years
now in the
ago? Was
West
that
last
2 years
season.
ago? Was it 2 years ago where it was very low in the West
Yeah, so last
or
season, the
East?
Jets had the second wildcard spot, 95 points. Actually,
Okay.
7 of the 8 playoff teams in the West had 100 or more points last season.
Okay. So
You
it was
might be
2 years
referring to
ago
2 years
in
ago
the West.
in the West. There wasn't quite as many teams with 100 points, but the second wildcard seed was actually Nashville, 97 points.
Mm-hmm.
So 95 last year, 97 the year before that. Going back 3 years. Okay, now we're getting into like the COVID years. And this is all over the place. But yeah, the last 2 years, 95 and 97 points.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to take that many points this year to get in.
It's funny for a Leaf fan to have done this yet, but the Oilers have 57 games left, and I said 67. So the Leafs fans got 67 in his brain. So 57 games left, and yeah, they would need like 65 to 70 points to get in, which is not easy. And like they're on a tear right now, and it's funny how emotional we get. When they were losing, it's like, no chance. This team's done. Season's over. Trade McDavid. And now they go on this tear, and it almost feels like it's a given that they're going to get in. But there's still a lot of work to do, because I always try to look at the pace a team needs. And you do get to a certain point, and people will look at numbers like that and say, yeah, the Oilers can get, 70 points in 57 games. And yeah, they totally can. But when you have that window, all it takes is like one losing streak where you lose 3, you're on the pace, and then you lose 3 or 4 in a row and you're done, or you start losing shootouts or overtimes or something. So it looks good for them now, but I'm not going to completely say they're out of it. I did say when we talked about this weeks ago that I was hoping they would make it interesting, because it would be fun. It'd be fun to watch them race for it, and it'd be hilarious, because let's say they are to get in. Who the fuck wants to play the Oilers in the first round? I don't care who you are. You don't want to play McDavid in the first round. So I'll be paying attention, man, just to see how this goes with Edmonton. But right now, Bruno, the briefcase of $1 million, if you're right, do the Edmonton Oilers make the playoffs?
I think they get in. And I'm completely changing my mind from 3 to 4 weeks ago when I wrote them off and I said their season was over. I said, we'll see you next year, Edmonton. I even sent out a tweet about it. I talked about it on the podcast. But at the time that I was chirping them and talking about how terrible they were when they were 2-9-1, I also mentioned that they were going to go on a run. I think we all saw this coming at some point, that team has too much individual talent with their top end guys to not go on a run. Now, did I think that they were going to win 7 or 8 in a row? Maybe not. But that's exactly what they've done to get back into it. The issue is, as you said, Lepore, if they even lose 3 of 4, or they go like 1-3-1 over 5, they lose 4 out of 5, 5 out of 6, like that's another nail in the coffin, basically. Like you can't afford that again. And sure, they still might be chasing some pretty terrible teams in the West, but if those teams can still hover above 500, play solid hockey, as we said, maybe finish with 90 to 92 points, they're probably going to get in. So if the Oilers go on one more losing streak, and I'm not even going to say they're going to lose like 5 in a row, but lose, like I said, 3 out of 4, 4 out of 6, 5 out of 7, like then you're behind the 8 ball again, and then you need to once again rip off a crazy winning streak. So I think the odds are still against them, but I'm going to say they get in just because of the quality of teams above them. I think some of these teams are pretty terrible, honestly. Like even like Nashville, I know they're in a playoff spot right now. I think they stink. The Coyotes kind of stink, even though, they're taking strides from what we've seen over the last few seasons. The Blues kind of stink. The Flames aren't very good. So like this is who they're battling right now. And I think the Oilers, it's safe to say they're the best team of all those teams. And even if you look at the underlying numbers like XGF percentage, the Oilers are second in the NHL in XGF. Like they have good underlying numbers, and they have pretty much the whole season. Their goaltending's just been trash. But right now, Kings actually lead the league in expected goals for percentage. The Oilers are number 2, and the Hurricanes are number 3. So, I mean, I know it's not the be-all and end-all, but pretty interesting stat.
Yeah. There's things always seem to play out the same way, though. That like the number, like how I said, the Coyotes are 500. Now, if Edmonton catches them, they'd have to be better than that. But I still think it's unlikely that you get in the 80s. Like we've seen it before, as I mentioned, but 86 points or something is not going to get you in. I don't care. Someone's going to turn it on. Someone's going to flip a switch and turn it on and get those spots. You at least have to aim for 90. You have to.
Yeah, got to get at least 90
to have a chance. And I mean, again, there's always like isolated years, but I don't know, man. The Oilers, I think they're confident. I think that's the thing right now. They have swagger. You watch them play and they're expecting to win. And you watch them on home ice, like, man, they're flying out there. And McDavid's gone into God mode. I don't know.
Like, even if you look at the books right now, Lepore, depending on where you're looking at, there's one book I'm looking at to make the playoffs. They're minus 390. So like that's an overwhelming yes, according to Vegas, that this team is, the implied probability of them making the playoffs is very high. And again, they're still chasing teams, but it looks like Vegas has absolutely no faith in the Coyotes or the Predators for that matter.
Well, like I said, Bruno, there's 57 games to go. So at the end of the day, the better team should be where they're supposed to be, right? And Nashville is, I mean, funny how they beat the Leafs earlier this year, but you look at their personnel, you look at the personnel of the Coyotes, and I like the Coyotes, actually.
I like the Coyotes as well. I think they got a great group of young players.
Yeah, they're fun. They're fun to watch. And Clayton Keller might be he plays in Arizona. He might be the most underrated player in the league. Like he's an absolute blast to watch. What a talent. But still, it's Edmonton. Like they just have the depth and the scoring that over the last 3 quarters of the season. Like I'm not saying I don't know if I agree with a minus 390 just based on the math and what they have to pull off, but yeah, it's I think a big piece of the pie is saying that they get into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think they're probably going to get in. It'll still be pretty tight down the stretch. Again, it's gonna depend on how these other teams play around them, because I think I'm pretty confident that Edmonton should play between, like, let's say a 90 and 95 point pace the rest of the season. It's just, will Arizona actually do that? Will the Predators do that? Will the Blues do that? Or the Wild? Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to say that the Oilers are the best team out of that mix. And it's just a matter of, are they going to get good goaltending? Because that was their problem when they were playing terribly. And listen, defensively, they were a mess too. But McDavid, like, did you see how quick he just flew up the NHL leaderboard in points? Like, it was insane.
It was like 13 points in 4 games or something stupid.
Just outrageous. He was like 100th in scoring, like barely a point a game. And then like 5 games later, he's like top 12 in scoring.
Yeah. You know what, man? I'm going to put out a hot take on the GFP podcast. And maybe it's not a hot take, depending on how you look at it. I'm going to say the Oilers catch the Canucks.
Wow.
I'm going to say they finish in the top 3.
Oh my God. So you went from, I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs, to now they're going to catch the Canucks.
Yeah, I think they're going to catch the Canucks. Now I think they are. Like, if I had to bet, I would say they are. And I just look at it, a lot of games, how good they look. And there's always the thing of when you get to the end of the year and you have to win games. I find the teams that really have the talent and really have to win those games do pull it off. So I think we could see something at the end of the season, the last 15 or 20 games, where the Oilers just go on a tear. And I'm going to say the Oilers make the playoffs, and I'm going to say it's not a wild card.
Wow. That is a take. That is a take. But they do have 3 games in hand on the Canucks.
Yeah.
3 games in hand on the Canucks.
And I'm sure they have to play them a few more times. And the Canucks smashed them, right? Was it twice they smashed them earlier in the season?
Yeah, very early in the season. And we saw the Oilers last year to close out the year. I think it was like 17-2-1, something outrageous like that over their last 20 games. So, I mean, listen, when you have 2 of the top 5 players in the world, anything is possible. I don't think they're going to finish top 3. I think those 3 teams are just going to, not that they're going to pull away. I just think they have too big of a cushion at this point for Edmonton to catch them. But I love that hot take, man. That is a take right there. The Oilers are going to catch the Canucks.
Yeah.
Jeez, I like that, Lepore.
And I'm a BC boy, so my family out there is throwing shit at their screen right now. Very, very upset with me.
Oh, come on, Lepore. Come on,
Yeah,
man.
I know. I
All
do love
right.
my Canucks, man.
Is there anything else you want to get off your chest before we wrap up this podcast?
I mean, the Oilers are always fun to talk about, Bruno. So I'm glad we dabbled on that. We should actually go over it. We've done 126 shows. How many shows have we not spoken about the Edmonton Oilers? The Oilers, man, they're just fun to talk about.
Oh,
Almost as fun as the Leafs.
We've probably mentioned them, maybe not in 100 of the 126, but something in the 90s, maybe 80s and 90s, I'd say.
Are they the number 2 team? 100%.
Yeah, that we've talked about on the show. I would say so.
Yeah, I feel like we should talk about Montreal a lot more. Like Montreal
we
was
used
always
to,
definitely
especially
topic.
during the COVID years, and then obviously when the Leafs and Habs met in the playoffs and the Leafs embarrassed themselves, we were talking a lot about the Habs. We have barely talked about the Habs over the last couple.
And they're doing well.
Seasons.
They are surprising people.
They're quietly having a pretty decent season, but we're still not going to talk about you, Montreal.
It's funny though, right? I mean, as we were just talking about the Oilers and how they can turn it around. At what? So like Montreal is playing above their initial expectations. Okay. And, I'll use a team in the division, Buffalo. Based on expectations, I'd say they're below, right? At how many games do you say as a fan, okay, this is the reality? 20, 30, 40? I always find that interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're pretty much at the reality right now. And maybe there's a couple outliers. As we said, the Oilers are an outlier, I think it's safe to say. But right now, it's pretty much the reality. What you see is kind of what you're going to get from your team moving forward.
So you think Montreal's like a 500 hockey team?
Yeah, and honestly, I think Montreal, they've exceeded expectations. I thought they'd be a lot worse than they are. I think they're going to hover around 500 the rest of the year. There's been some other teams in the Atlantic that have just been shitty this year. Like we said, like the Sabres, they've been garbage. The Senators have been garbage. Even the Lightning have been struggling. But the Habs, man, and again, it's not like the Habs are like tearing up the conference or the division, but they're 12, 13, and 3. I mean, they're bad. Like, let's not sugarcoat it here. Like, they have a minus 21 goal differential, but I thought they'd be like a lot worse than they are record-wise.
Bruno, I'm gonna pump my tires here. In the preseason when we did the futures points, I put Montreal over, man, because I always say teams are never that bad. Whenever there's a team they think is gonna be fucking 50 points, or no, they're never that bad. They always surprise people.
Can you imagine they finish ahead of the Senators, your second favorite team?
Bro. I when it comes to the Montreal Canadiens and the Ottawa Senators, and they've played each other in the playoffs. Michael Lepore, huge Leafs fan, who lives in Ottawa and is surrounded by Ottawa Senators fans, and there's a lot of Montreal Canadiens fans in this city as well. My saying is always, man, I'm so excited just to sit back and enjoy the show. If the Montreal Canadiens finish ahead of the Ottawa Senators, that would be fucking hilarious in the city. The reactions and the chirping that would be done on the side of the Montreal Canadiens fans, and the defending that would be done on the side of the Ottawa Senators fans, it would be absolutely hilarious. So I would love to sit back and watch that show.
Oh, and I would love to talk about that because we're going to talk about that. If the Habs finish ahead of the Senators, and I sent out a tweet when the Leafs beat the Senators about a week ago, and I said, listen, Toronto has not missed the playoffs in the Matthews, Marner, and Nylander era dating back to 2016, 2017. And the Senators, who I've been told now for years, are going to take that next step. They're going to take a leap. They are on pace to miss the playoffs for a 7th straight season. They look terrible once again. So it's a disaster in Ottawa.
They got
and maybe they'll turn it around. And maybe we'll save it for the next episode of this podcast. But if they finish behind the Montreal Canadiens, we might have to dedicate a 2-hour podcast to that.
I love it. It's 2-1 Edmonton, by the way. Our boy.
It?
Our boy Gagne scored. Yeah, so.
Jeez.
They're making it, man. They're making it.
Here they come.
All
right. Said. Well, I guess that's going to do it for episode 126 of the GFP podcast. The Gluttons for Punishment Podcast, 126 deep. Jeez. I know we said this at 100. I didn't think we'd make it this far. And here we are, baby. Here we are. And the Leafs still stink through it all. In the grand scheme of things, they still can't win anything. But yeah, I mean, we'll see how the Leafs play over the next little bit, because they seem to have turned a corner over the last, 3 to 5 games, and they're still dealing with injuries. But I think they're going to turn things around. But as always, if you're a long-time listener, first-time listener, you really enjoyed this episode, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and review on either Apple or Spotify. And if you're watching us on YouTube and you really enjoy the content, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and ring the notification bell while you're at it so you know exactly when the GFP podcast is dropping some new content. For Michael Lepore, I'm Anthony Bruno. The Leafs are back, baby. Let's go. We will see you in the next one.
Thanks, everyone.